Hi all. Hi Rohit. Hope you can hear me. Let me just share my screen. Hello. Hi Rohit. You can hear me, right?
Hello. Hello,
Yeah.
Bhaumik. Yeah, I can hear.
Okay. Okay. Fine. I see Sarangs is joining in as well. Let's wait for a minute, then we'll give it a start. Okay. I think he's in. So let's give it a start. So sorry for last week. I got some work because of which I could not continue. So let's continue from where we had left off. So we were looking at two concepts before we move ahead. And before we looked into those two concepts, we looked into the each and every distribution plot of the four features which we have in our data to identify what kind of a bifurcation factor or a demarcation that we can find to identify the species of the iris flower. Now let's try to complete what we were doing. In the last session, we were looking into the covariance. And covariance is simply a measure that you that we were trying to calculate so that we can find out if there is an increase in a certain value, y, if there is an increase in a certain value, or what is the direction of change. So in a better way, we can say that what is the direction of change on one variable if there is a change on another one. So these are the three cases that we have. And we have looked into the formula. I'll just quickly go through the formula once more. So what we are doing is, let's say we have four random variables, or we have two random variables x and y, which can take four values. Okay, with a mean of 3.1, these are the four values of x. With a mean of 11, these are the four values of y. Essentially, how we are calculating the covariance with a division of n minus 1, where n is the number of samples, right? So n is the number of values which we have. The reason why we are doing n minus 1 is known as Bessel's correction, and then at later stage we'll also come to know, or we'll learn about something known as degrees of freedom. Okay, I can quickly tell you what is degrees of freedom right now, but maybe let's look into the formula first, and then we can look into what is the degrees of freedom. Okay, then the formula, what it is saying is, we are simply doing a summation of each and every multiplication of combination of xi value where mean is subtracted from that value. So what I'm saying here is 2.1 minus 3.1 multiplied by 8 minus 11. So that's one set. And then we have three other sets like this, right? So we are going to do such kind of sets, and then we calculate this value, divide by 4 minus 1. Here 4 is the number of samples we have, right? So we divide by 3 and we get the results. Okay, now this result that we get, this is a positive result. So if this result is quite positive, and what I mean by quite positive, as we explained or saw in the last class as well, quite positive means it should not be like 0.7. Okay, 0.7 is, yes, it is reflecting a positive covariance, but very not a very high positive covariance, which means that I can't be 100% sure that increase in x is going to result in increase in y, or vice versa, right? Now, the other thing to note over here is that we have taken the formula in a way that we are doing a covariance of x comma y, and then we have written the formula in this way, right? You can see we are trying to find out covariance of x and y, and then we are trying to find out this. right? What happens if I write this as covariance of y and x? I'll simply replace this with this, right? So this part comes first, then comes this part, and that does not change the output of the equation. If you look at it carefully, 8 minus 11 multiplied by 2.1 minus 3.1 is the same as 2.1 minus 3.1 multiplied by 8 minus 11. So covariance of x of y is equal to covariance of y of x. So it doesn't really matter here, right? This is the formula. So this is where a certain problem is. And the problem is that from here, at least reducing covariance and another factor that we are going to look at, we can't say if x increases, y will also increase, and vice versa. So vice versa thing we cannot prove, right? So we can try to plot the data, and then only we can see if there is any relationship. So for example, I can clearly see that as x is increasing, y is also increasing. Okay, you can call this just a measure or an indication of whether there is really a relationship or not, because here we are lucky we have only 4 values. Imagine if we are going to have, let's say, 400 values. By looking at the 400 values and the randomness of them, because these are values collected out of some kind of sampling or some kind of experimentation, so it's not really possible, right? I mean, to do a calculation looking at the numbers, or otherwise we won't be needing any formulas like this. So in that cases, this value is going to come handy, whereby if I am seeing that this value is a bit or at least considerable amount greater than 0, then I can say that there is a positive covariance. And what I mean by positive covariance is that these variables x and y are positively correlated. So one increases, the other tend to increase as well. What happens if you replace x with y? We expect similar behavior, but we don't know what kind of trend it is going to follow. So example given, let's say if I have x like y like this and x like this. So this is x now, and this is, let's say, y. Okay. If I see that the covariance or the plot is something like this does not mean that if I'm going to replace x and y tomorrow, so let's say now this becomes y, okay, and this becomes x. I can't say that the same kind of line, or let's say the degree over here is, let's say, 45 degree. Okay, I can't say that a plot of y and x is also x and y is also going to be 45 degree because the plot of y and x was equal to 45 degree, right? I can't say that. Only basis this value I cannot say that. So that is the limitation here. Okay, that is the limitation of covariance. Covariance simply gives you a value. It's a measure of how much two random variables vary together. Okay, it is similar to variance, but variance works on a single variable, while covariance works on two variables, right? Now, if the value is very near to 0, this is what is going to happen. Okay, something on the positive side as well as the negative side, the value is very close to 0. This is what we are going to get. The other thing we need to note is if the value is negative, there will be a large negative covariance. Now, keeping this in mind, let's proceed with the next set, but maybe we can look into a problem. Okay, so let's say oh yes. Before maybe we look into a problem, we can look into a problem at later stage. We can use our data set only to find the problem, and let's try to define y with data n minus 1. Okay. So let's say that I have some equation. Okay, I'm trying to solve a mathematical equation, algebraic equation, which is like 3x plus 2y minus 4z is equal to 11. So this is one equation I have. So you can say I have one equation, I have three unknowns. If I have one equation, three unknowns, there is no way on this earth that you can find the values of all the unknowns. You have three unknowns, you need at least three equations. So let's write the rest of the two equations. Let's say the second equation is 5x minus 2y plus 9z is equal to 19. And then the third is, let's say, I don't know, 7x plus 2y minus 14z is equal to 25 or maybe 26. Now that I have three unknowns and three equations, I should be able to solve this problem. But there is a very interesting thing to note. If I factor this down, or if I break this problem down into matrix algebra, which we have seen briefly earlier, I can get a matrix of the coefficients here, and I'll get a matrix of the coefficients here. And by solving them, I'll be getting the value. Okay, so what I mean by that is I'm going to get something like this: 3, 2, and then -4. And then in the next row, I'm going to get 5, and then I'm going to get -2, I'm going to get 9. And then in the next row, I'm going to get 7, and then I'm going to get +2, and I'm going to, oh, sorry, I'm going to get 2. And then at last, I'm going to get -14. Okay, so this is the matrix of the coefficients, right? This is the matrix of the coefficients. If I multiply this matrix of coefficients with the matrix of unknowns, right, I should be getting that equal to the matrix of 11, 19, 26, right? So this is the basic idea of linear algebra, although we have not really gone depth into it, but I believe we have done some basics and we can understand what is happening here, right? So the multiplication of two matrices, in which case first is the matrix with coefficients and the second one is the matrix with the unknowns, is going to give me the matrix of the answers. In this case, you can clearly see, I can try to solve the first two equations. And by means of the first two equations, if I am able to find out the value of y and z, I can simply put that in the third equation and get the value of x. And then I can try and solve all the three equations, find the value of x, y, and z, which means that if to solve three equations with three unknowns, or if to find the values of three unknown, I need three equations. Then to find the value of two unknowns, I need two equations, as of course. So to find the values of y and z, in this case, I'll try to solve equation number 1 and 2, let's say. I'll randomly pick equation number 1 and 2. I'll solve for y and I'll solve for z. In the first equation, maybe I'll find y is equal to 11 minus 3x plus 4z divided by 2. And then from the second equation, I'm going to find the value of y, which is going to be 19 minus 9z plus, minus 5x divided by -2. Okay, so this is going to be the value. Now, if I'm going to substitute this value of y into both of the equations, I should be able to solve for z, which comes in the terms of x. And then from the third equation, I should be able to find out the value of x as well. So in this way, we solve three unknowns where we have three equations because we need three equations. Simple. In this case, as you can see, actually, you are solving only two equations. You can take any two equations you want and you can simply solve those two equations. You can take the first one and the third one. You can take the second one and the third one, or the first and the second one. You solve for these two, you will obviously get the third equation's answer, right? This is the basic concept, but this is a very simple way to understand what is degrees of freedom. Okay, this is a very easy way to remember what is degrees of freedom. If you have n number of random variables, you do not need to know n number of unknowns which is related to those random variables. How these unknowns comes into picture is what we saw in basics of statistics. These are the factors which you cannot control. There will always be features or let's say random variables coming up with something inherent with them which you don't control. You control their values. Okay, I can control the number of positives and negatives which will be there in these three equations, because ultimately it's x, y, and z, which means they fall inside a three-dimensional space. So the way I move myself or the way I position my plane, because if you look at this, these three things are essentially what? These three equations are actually nothing but, if this is x, this is y, and this is z, then these three equations are basically forming a plane, right? If you solve these three equations, they'll actually come out as a plane. If that's going to be the plane, I have the control, let's say, to put this plane anywhere. I can put it inclined to this side or onto this side or onto this side, and it is going to ultimately determine the value of my unknowns, right? So I have some control here, but I don't have the entire control. I don't control the entire three-dimensional space, right? I cannot, because then I should have control all the objects in our world as well. So that's why mathematically you cannot control all the variables. That's why each and every number which is associated, or each and every coefficient associated with this plane, comes up with an unknown. And you need to find those unknowns so that you can find the optimal plane. Or you can try to find the values of unknowns for any plane. right? When you get the plane, you get to know, since the plane is in 3 dimensions, you get to know 3 equations because you have 3 sets of uh, coefficients that apply to unknowns, right? So in the same way, if you look at random variables, in this case, I have 4 random variables. Okay, there will be factors which are affecting each and every of the random variables. If I am able to find out the factors affecting the first 3, I don't need to find that of the fourth one. Okay, I don't need to find that for the fourth one because I've already found what is affecting the first 3. And by solving that, or by converting that or representing that as a mathematical equation of 4 unknowns and 4 equations, right? Here I have 4 variables. I have 4 unknowns and I can create 4 equations out of it. If these can be mathematically represented by means of the factors which are unknowingly affecting them, right? So if the factors can be written down, then I can mathematically convert these 4 variables or these 4 random variable values into 4 equations. And then I don't need to solve the 4 equations, right? We have seen that already. I just need to solve the equation for the first 3 unknowns. These are the coefficients. Oh, by the way, these are not the unknowns. I already know the value. So these are the coefficients. I don't need to find the unknown that is associated with the fourth coefficient, because if I solve for the first 3, I get the fourth. So that's why this n-1 thing comes into picture. This is otherwise known as Bessel's correction. While dealing with samples, there are n-1 terms that have the freedom to vary, which means if I change these 3 values, I can clearly see the variation in these because I know what is the mean. If I'm saying that there is a random variable, in this case, this was y. In this case, this was y, and the mean is 11. I already know these 3 values. Then I don't need to ask you what is the fourth value. Why? Because I can calculate that from the mean. So the freedom of movement in the space of number system is only with these 3 numbers, because ultimately they have to converge to a mean of 11. Right? In the same way, our 4 or 3 unknown equations are going to converge to some numbers, right? So I had the coefficients, I had the unknowns, and then on the right hand side, I had the values. So ultimately, whatever you do, these unknowns, okay, these coefficients and a combination of these unknowns are going to result into something which is going to converge to this number, right? So that's why only 2 elements have the freedom to vary. The third element will converge because I have to match the numbers, right? That is known as the degrees of freedom, and we put that in case of sample in the denominator because we want to do a correction. We want to make sure that we are not overdoing things. We are not overdoing any calculation. We're trying to minimize or cancel out the effect of any kind of errors which can be introduced during sample, right? Now, keeping that in mind, although that's not really going to come handy right now, later on it's going to come handy. Okay. Some things that we need to know. A large covariance can mean a strong relationship between variables. However, you cannot compare variances over data sets with different scales. What I mean by that is, let's say I cannot compare pounds and inches and try to find out a variance. Okay, this is where there is a problem. Why? Because the main problem with the interpretation of covariance is that if there is a wide range of results the random variables are going to take, then it is going to make it hard to interpret the value. Okay, for example, if your data set returns a value of 3 or 3000, you have a very wide range, right? If you have a very large range of the values of x and y, okay, then you have very large covariance. Let's say a value of 300. So in this case also you can see it is written there in the text. A value of 300 tells us that the variables are correlated, but unlike the correlation coefficient, coefficient is what? The one that we have found out. This is known as the correlation coefficient. Okay, this is the covariance value. Sorry, we are going to find out the correlation coefficient at a later stage. Now, this number doesn't exactly tell us how strong the relationship is. That is told by the correlation coefficient, right? This problem can be fixed by dividing covariance with the standard deviation to get the correlation coefficient. So what we are doing essentially is to make sure that even if I have data, I have x and y, which are 2 variables in different scales, it can have any number of values, it can have any range of values. I would like to minimize the fact or I would like to ascertain what is the strength of the relationship. I have come to know, let's say in this case, I have come to know it is 2.267. It's fine, fine. I got to know that there is a positive relationship. X increases, Y will also increase, fine. But how much? How much is that going to increase? Is that going to be steep line like this? You see, this is a 45-degree line. It means it is an exact growth, right? 100% increase in X results into 100% increase in Y. 200% increase in X results into 200% increase in Y. So that is the strength. I would like to know what is the strength. And that strength can only be found if I nullify the effect of scale of the variables. And to do that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to define, or I'm going to divide the covariance, the value that I've got over here, right? This 2.267. I'm going to divide this by the standard deviation of each variable. So I calculate the standard deviation of 2.1. I calculate standard deviation of no, I'm sorry, not only 2.1. I mean, I calculate the standard deviation of all these four values. That becomes sigma x, and then I get sigma of y, and then I simply multiply sigma of x and sigma of y, I divide that. Okay, I put that in the denominator, then I should be able to get rid of the scale, because as we already know, this and this will be of the same scale, right? So x of scale multiplied by scale of y divided by scale of x scale of y, hence the scales are cancelled, and hence we get a true number. Okay, those are the advantages of correlation coefficient. Now, if you calculate correlation coefficient, let's say, if we take an example and try to calculate correlation coefficient, you will find that it is always between -1 and +1. Okay, a value is always between -1 and +1. Why? Because now you have done something with that a division activity that you did, right? You have done something unknowingly or knowingly, that is known as standardization. You have standardized the values. Earlier, you were not in control of the range of the values that these random variables can get. Now you have standardized them. Okay, because you have standardized them, the range is now going to get limited. This is from -1 to +1. Please remember this. This is one of the very important concepts, not only with respect to correlation and understanding covariance, where it lacks and why do we need correlation coefficient. It's also because of the standardization activity, right, that we are doing. This will be very, very helpful when you are going to model your data. In almost all of the real world cases, you can never control the scale. If I give you a data set of people with X number of heights and Y number of weights, so you're trying to compare X and Y, where X is heights, Y is weights. You have no control on what kind of sampling I've done, how many people I have sampled, and what is the scale in which I have recorded the data. Because you are doing the modeling, you are doing the analysis after I have done the sampling. Okay, you don't control the scale in which I have collected the data, because I've done a survey. Let's say I've done a survey in my area and I'm trying to find out what's the height and the weight of any person. So I go with a form with a person, to a person, I ask him or her to write down height and weight. There is no control. I can't force that person. I can advise him, boss, can you please write your height in, let's say, feet, and can you write your weight in, let's say, kgs. The person who is writing the value can choose to write it in any different scale, right? Then I have to generalize it. Let's say half of the people have written it in kg, half of the people have actually written it in grams. So let's say to standardize it, I think it will be easier. Maybe that is my point of view. I think it is easier. Let's say, let's try to convert everything into grams. In that case, you see there is a lot of range which is going to come, because now grams will be like a bigger value, right? So in this case, when we are trying to divide the covariance that we have found with that height and weight data that I gave you, you are dividing that value with the standard deviation. You are removing the scale. This is known as standardization of the data, standardization of the data set or the features which you have. Standardization always results in a value between +1 and -1. Okay, and this is a very good example in which you can see what is the effect of any value ranging between +1 and -1. Something which is in the negative, it gives how strong the negativity will be. Okay, can you understand what is going to happen in this case? If let's say this is r equal to 0 and this is r equal to -0.4, if r is equal to -0.5, in which direction it is going to go? It is going to go in this direction. R is equal to -0.6 is this. 0.7 is this, 0.8 is this, and so on. Okay, minus 0.3 is this, minus 0.2 is this, minus 0.1 is this. Ultimately, 0 is the straight line again, which we have got over here. And then if you go positive, the positive lines will be on this direction. Are you getting my point? How it is going? The positive directions are on this side, the negative are on this side. So basically, the negative ones are clockwise, and the positive ones are anti-clockwise. Right? That's why. Okay. Now, what happens if the value of r was not 0.4, it was 1? It would have been this line itself. The value of x remains constant. Sorry, the value of y is going to remain constant if there is an increase in the value of x. So a value of 1 will be something like this. It will always increase. Infinitely, there will be an increase, or there can be an infinite decrease in the other direction. Rare to rare case, you will never find such kind of a thing, but you may find out values which are closer to, let's say, 0.9. Okay, let's say you find that the correlation of some x and y is closer to 0.9, or some x and y closer to 0. Or minus 0.89. Okay. In this case, you can clearly say there is a very strong positive correlation and very strong negative correlation in this case between the variables x and y. And that helps you to understand what feature affects what other feature or other values or other columns in your data set. Similar to what we are trying to do over here, right? What we are trying to do over here is as simple as we are trying to ascertain if petal length, petal width, sepal length, sepal width, are there any relationships between them, or are there any impact or the values of these four columns on the output that I'm trying to find out, or the pattern for which I'm trying to find out the pattern for. So that part is the species. So I'm just trying to find out if a combination of these four features or their interrelationships or their relationship with the species of the flower is going to determine what is the nature of the data, or what does the data say about the relationship of these four features with respect to the species. Right? This is what we are going to do. So as simple as I've already executed all the cells, so I have the iris data over here. As simple as that, what I do, I take a data frame and I use a function which is dot corr. Right? So in this case, my data frame is iris. Okay. I'm simply going to put a comment finding the correlation. Okay. We are ignoring the covariance since we know it is not reliable. Okay. Covariance does not provide the strength of relationship, right? But correlation does. Very, very important point. Okay, please remember this until the day you want to work as a data scientist. Correlation does not mean causation. Just because there is a correlation between x and y does not mean that x is causing y, right? So let's say you have a graph where x is increasing with y or y is increasing with x. It does not mean that x is causing the value of y. It's just a relationship and the strength that you are trying to find out. That's all. Don't try to find out a definitive answer here. That's not the purpose. Here we are doing data analysis. In data analysis, we don't find an answer. We simply find the analysis. We simply analyze. You want to find an answer, you have to do hypothesis testing. You have to do machine learning. You don't find it here. You're simply analyzing the data, right? Here, what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to fire this command and I'm going to get a table. This table is what? This table is again similar, somewhat. This is somewhat similar to this thing. Let me just go and scroll up. You saw this one, right? These are the pair plots. If you see, if you remember what we did during the pair plots, I'll just zoom out a little bit just for a moment. The diagonal section are the histograms, or the distributions, which are the cumulativeness of the scatter plots which you see below them, right? Now, If I take only one diagonal and I look at these 6 plots which are below that diagonal, so let's say on the left hand side of the diagonal I have 6 plots, on the right hand side I have 6 more plots. If I look at only these 6 plots, I can get the idea, because the other 6 plots are basically repeats. So this plot here is same as this plot. This plot over here, okay, is same as the other one there, right? So it is just a mirror image. This part is a mirror image of this part, right? It's the same thing what is happening over here as well. So let me zoom in again. What is happening over here is this line, this diagonal line, you see every value is 1. Okay, obviously this is the highest strength of correlation, and that is going to happen because if you look at the intersection, Sepulveda intersected with Sepulveda, obviously the value is going to be 1.0. Right? In real life, you won't find that. Okay. Then again, there is one more problem. I have a problem here. The problem here is I only have 4 columns. Where is the 5th one? The 5th one is the species, right? I want to know what is the relationship with species as well. Here, I can only answer one half of my question, is what is the correlation amongst the variable. Example given, sepal length seems to be very highly correlated with petal length and petal width. Right? Again, petal length is very highly correlated with petal width. You see, 0.96, quite close to 1. Right? So I can get the correlation between each and every variable. That does not mean that an increase in the petal length results in an increase in the petal width. That is the meaning of this line. Correlation does not mean causation. Right? Right? So if I look at these values, only the diagonal values, okay, look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 values. You can clearly say there is a good negative correlation. This is a not a very high value, right? It's minus 0.4. Minus 0.4 within the range of -1 to +1 is not really very big thing. Had it been the case, let's say it's closer to minus 0.9, I would have said there is a very strong negative correlation. But in this case, I'll say there is somewhat negative correlation between sepal width and the petal length. But if I look at this number, I can say there is a huge positive correlation between petal length and the petal width. But I don't have the 4th value. I don't have the species. This is a very, very problematic thing, because I wanted to know what is the correlation or the effect of each and every variable, each and every feature on the species, right? But I cannot get that. Can anybody guess why I am not able to get that? Okay, I'm not able to get that because that 4th value is a string value. I can do a mathematical operations only on numbers. I cannot do that on a string value. So to do that, I'll have to convert that. I'll have to convert that into a number, and then only I should be able to do it. How do I convert that into a number is something we will do in the next class. In this case, we will only look into a visual form of the correlation. Why we are looking into visual form is because if let's say we have only 4 features over here, imagine a data set which has 20. Then in that case, it becomes very difficult for you to look at the numbers. Although people who are good with numbers will find out things looking at this table only. They don't have to go anywhere else, right? But then it is always good to represent the number in a visualized format. So what do you do in that case is that you simply take this and you say, let's visualize this. I believe when we were looking at pandas and matplotlib, we may have quickly seen this. It's sns.heatmap. And then I pass this value and I say plt.show. And it gives me the heat map. On the x and y axis, I have the variables. On this side, on the right hand side, I have a scale. The scale goes dark if there is negative correlation. The scale goes high if there is a positive correlation. So obviously, the diagonal elements are white, absolutely white. Then I have a problem here. You see, the hue is not selected. By default, there is a hue which is selected, right? So I think we can change the hue. Let's try to find out if we can change it. the function heat map should have an option to change the color scheme that is being used over here, but diagonally I can see it is entirely white, and then there are very high negative correlations, very high things which is going on here. So that's why I have certain areas which are really black. Okay, these can be represented by these negative correlations which is happening here. So because the color is chosen in this way, maybe that is the reason why it's getting represented like this, but I can clearly understand what is going on over here. It's very clear that anything in this orangey range is where I should be looking at a very good correlation, and that is happening here as well, right? So let's say sepal length and the petal width. If I go back to the table, sepal length and the petal width, you see it has a very good positive correlation. So that is the reason why the color is almost near to white. Okay, but what about this petal length and the petal width? This is the petal length. Okay, this is the petal width. You see the color is almost white. You cannot really distinguish between this diagonal cell and this cell, right? Because the color is almost matching with it. So this is one way to visualize. I am sure you can change the hue. Let's try to search SNS dot heat map change color palette. I'm sure there should be something. Control color and seabound heat map. Okay, let's see. So I hope I was clear in the explanation, right? The explanation is that I'm simply trying to find out what is the correlation. Okay, what is the correlation, or maybe I'm going to use this. Okay, let's see this one. I think this one will be good. Okay, I'm just trying to find out the correlation. I'm just trying to find out the correlation of variables. This looks at least better than the last one. I'm just trying to find out the correlation between the variables, but I'm not able to find correlation of these variables or effects of these variables on the species, because species is into character and I've not converted that into a number. Okay, if I convert that into a number, I should be able to see the effect. Let's quickly do one thing, although we will explain this later. Let's convert the species field into a number. Okay, this operation is not part of EDA. Okay, this is part of data preparation. We do data preparation when we are done with EDA and we would like to perform modeling. Okay, so we are skipping a few beats over here, but it will be an interesting thing for you to note. We can use a library to do the process of converting or representing any categorical variable. Okay, here we have a categorical variable, right? It has only 3 values. So the process of representing categorical variable as a numeric one is also called encoding, right? So you have two kinds of encoding in total. One is called label encoding and one is called one-hot encoding. Okay, let's quickly understand what is that. But before that, let's try to do a label encoding. Okay, so I'm going to import library, import the function in Python to do the encoding, right? So I'm going to say from it's a library called sklearn, and in the library there is a function, there is a feature called pre-processing. I think this is the case. Import label encoder. Let's try to run this. If I'm wrong, I'll look into Google. Okay, but I feel it is there in the pre-processing module only. But if not, then let me just quickly. Yeah, it's there. It's there. So my command has executed. So what I do now is that I'm going to create an object of label encoder. Okay, please ignore what is going on here. We will try to understand what is label encoding shortly. I'm going to create a label encoder object, and then what I'm going to do, encode the species values. To do that, what I'm going to do, iris species is equal to ali.fit underscore transform. We'll explain all of these things, so don't worry. Iris species. So I'm simply passing iris species into the fit transform function of the label encoder object, and I'm replacing the existing value with the output. Right? If I do that and then I check the iris data set, I get something like this. You see what has happened here? It has converted the values of species into zeros and ones. So I can simply say iris species, and then I take a dot value underscore counts, and I can clearly see now it has 0, 1, and 2. Which one is what? We don't know. We don't know. That's the limitation of this library. We don't know which one is what. Okay, we'll have to try and check which one is what. Maybe it started with this, it was and so on. But ideally, how it does is it goes by the order. Okay, so it goes by the first one, then the second one, and the third one. Right now, if I do the correlation, let's see what happens. Okay, let's see if this correlation is going to work now. You see over here, I can see the correlation. I can see the correlation of species, and the most effective correlation is this: petal length and petal width have near to 100% positive correlation. Right? This is what I wanted to show you. The moment I convert it into number, I'm able to get the answer. Let's stop here. I think we don't have time now, so maybe we are going to continue tomorrow. If you have any questions, please do let me know. Yeah. Thank you. Good night.